Comenzamos el bloque informativo en Extra News.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for having us here today.
Good to see you.
So you had quite an eventful morning
We did.
over at Union Station, as we saw in that clip. Tell us about how you decided to go over there. You know, a lot of us D.C. residents and former D.C. residents know it well, but it's been the site of a lot of crime in recent years.
Of course.
And you decided to pay a visit. What happened?
Well, so a couple things. So first of all, I had heard from a couple of friends who used to avoid Union Station because there were vagrants and there were crazy people screaming at kids that they avoided Union Station. But over the past 9 days, since the president did this emergency order, it looks a lot better. It feels a lot safer. So I was talking with Stephen Miller and with Pete Hegseth about this in the Oval Office yesterday. And I was like, you know, we should just go over there and say hello to people. And you've got a lot of National Guardsmen over there, some DC cops who have been heckled by some of the protesters. So I thought, what a good show of moral support to have the vice president and some of the senior team at the White House show up. We bought him some burgers, hang out with him a little bit. And actually, the most interesting thing, Laura, was after the cameras left, Pete and Steve and I stayed and, you know, had lunch with these troops and just learned a lot about what they're seeing, about how much the city has changed in just the past 9 days. So crazy statistic, you know, violent crime has dropped in D.C. 35% in 9 days. Robberies in D.C. have dropped 55% in 9 days. And it highlights the fact that this living with lawlessness and disorder, that's fundamentally a question of political will. If you've got the political will to enforce the law, you can make even cities like D.C. safe again. And that's what we're demonstrating. And I hope that the American people take an important lesson from this, because obviously D.C. is a federal city, New York, L.A., these places are not. I hope the American people just recognize that you don't have to live with lawlessness. You don't have to live with third world murder rates. If you just take control of these cities, you can make them safe places to live in.
So your pal Gavin Newsom calls this an abuse of power, that this is just a power grab, and this is all stunt for show, and that you all are going to roll through other cities. You've heard things about, it's martial law is going to be declared.
Yep.
And to that you say?
Well, first of all, how is it a power grab or how is it a stunt when we've already declined murders by 35% in 9 days? How many people are living and breathing today because Donald Trump had the willpower to say, you know what, we're sick of D.C. being a home to lawlessness. We're going to bring some public order back to the nation's capital. So what I would say to Gavin Newsom or to anybody else in some of these big blue states or big blue cities is you can have law and order, you can have common decency, you can have public spaces that young families can go to again. Tell you a story, Laura. A couple of years ago, the last time I was in Union Station, I took my little kids there to get lunch, and they were being screamed at by homeless people, not compassionate to the homeless people to let them just fester when they clearly have mental health problems, not compassionate to young families to not be able to go into one of America's great public spaces without being screamed at by a person clearly suffering
Why are
from a
Democrats
mental
doing
illness.
this?
I don't know.
Why is this a
don't
political
know.
strategy for
Laura,
them?
I have thought about this so often and so many times. I don't know why Democrats seem to love public disorder and chaos almost as a political ideology. And I think that part of what's going on is Democrats have gotten so divorced from the communities that they allegedly serve that they don't realize the gross majority of residents in D.C., they want to walk through Union Station and just have a bite to eat or enjoy the space with their families. They don't realize that so many people have been absolutely terrorized by Democrat crime policies. And so maybe they just don't make the connection between what Gavin Newsom says and the fact that places like D.C. or Los Angeles have some of the highest murder rates in the world.
And the D.C. police are being investigated for potentially manipulating their crime data. I've heard this from other police forces across the country. Great cops, beat cops in places like Chicago have said, some of the crimes are reclassified to make a burglary something that's more of a disturbance, and that kind of stuff happens. But is this a federal issue at this point, if this is a manipulation of data and if it's widespread?
Well, it's certainly something that's being investigated, and I hope that we'll uncover what's going on. But even aside from any manipulation of data, when you have 911 wait times that are so long, a lot of crime doesn't even get reported. And we heard this all the time. People would say, well, my home's being robbed. I'm not even going to call the police because it's going to be 45 minutes before they show up. And that's not an indictment of the beat cop, by the way. They're so overwhelmed by how much violent crime there is that they're unable to actually bring public safety to these communities. So what we're doing is just changing the balance a little bit. We're putting more good guys on the streets, and we're taking more bad guys off the streets, and we think that's the sort of thing that's going to bring public safety back to D.C. Again, it's already working in a very big way.
Now, on to Ukraine. Your February meeting with Zelensky and the president, that was quite something to behold.
It was good
how did you all break the ice this time? Take us into the room, because we're all dying to know that.
Well, I think so President Zelensky walked into the Oval Office. I was chatting with him, with the president, with some of the senior Ukrainian delegation. I said, Mr. President, so long as you behave, I won't say anything. And he just chuckled a little bit, and it was a good little icebreaker. I mean, what the president's trying to do, meaning our president is trying to do, is bring a 3.5-year, very brutal conflict to a stop. It's killed way too many Ukrainians, way too many Russians. It's completely transformed the economy of Europe and of big parts of Asia. We just got to get back to peace. And I really do think you heard Vladimir Putin say this, that if Donald Trump had been president in 2022, this war would have never started. And now the president is really spending a lot of time, a lot of effort to stop Joe Biden's war, because I think it is Joe Biden's war. Without him being weak and provocative, I don't think that Russia would have invaded Ukraine. And now we have a situation where the president is trying to be strong and bold and trying to bring this thing to a close.
Now, take us into the room when the president said, I'm going to call Putin now. And you got the Western leaders, they've all come to Washington. Now, what was their facial expression at that point? Did they anticipate that this was going to happen? Because it was, 8 hours ahead, Moscow time?
Yeah, it was like 1 a.m. Moscow time, and they had no anticipation. So we're actually in the east wing of the White House, and the president says, we've had a pretty good meeting. I'm going to go call Vladimir Putin and see what he says about it. And everybody's like, oh, you're going to call him next week? And he's like, no, what time is it in Moscow? Let's call him right now. And I think one of the things I've realized about President Trump's leadership is he cuts through the BS of some of these diplomatic protocols and just says, I'm going to get things done. If I want to talk to somebody, I'm going to talk to somebody. You had a lot of the Europeans who were saying, no, there needs to be proper, vetting, and the teams have to prepare the phone call and blah, 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 blah. And the president was like, no. I want to talk to the guy. I'm going to talk to the guy. And I think that kind of no holds barred, no BS diplomacy is part of the reason why we've made the progress we have. And we've made a lot of progress, Laura. Look, who knows what's going to happen? The president tells me this all the time. You can never say with certainty what the outcome in this situation is going to be. But we now have the Russians talking to the Ukrainians. They're talking details about what would be necessary on each side to stop the fighting and stop the killing. We've made more progress in 3 months than the country had made in 3 years in stopping this conflict. And I think it's because sometimes you just need a president who will pick up the phone and call somebody.
When Vladimir Putin meets with Volodymyr Zelensky, can we assume that all the big details will have been discussed and generally agreed upon, namely the security agreement and land swap?
It's a good question. I think that if you go through the bureaucratic process, then the answer is yes. But I think the president's preference and my preference would be, let's have them meet regardless. You don't have to figure out every issue. And sometimes leaders sitting down face to face can break the logjam that their teams don't necessarily have the ability to do. There really are 2 big questions lingering out there. And in some ways it's very simple, but in some ways it's very complicated. Number one is Ukraine wants to know that it's not going to get invaded again by Russia. It wants to know that it's got territorial integrity long into the future. The Russians want certain pieces of territory, most of which they've occupied, but some of which they haven't. So that is really where the meat of the negotiation is. The Ukrainians want security guarantees. The Russians want a certain amount of territory. Again, we finally got the details. We're working on them, but we haven't figured everything out. And I don't think that we should force, we shouldn't say that they can't sit down until you figured out every little detail. Sometimes them sitting down is what facilitates figuring out those details.
You have been so strong on the idea of Europe paying for Europe's defense.
Sure.
And I think a lot of Americans don't understand that the EU GDP last year was about $19.18 trillion, if I'm right,
yep,
give or take. And the UK's is about 2.9 trillion.
Sure.
Ours is 29.8 trillion, right?
You know the numbers better than I do. You should be Treasury Secretary.
Sorry, Scott, I got your job. Now, but so this is a lot of money. Europe has the money to defend itself. So the security agreement, my question to you is, Why should America carry the lion's share of the burden from now until Lord knows when for Europe when Europe has the money to defend itself?
Well, I don't think we should carry the burden here. I think that we should be helpful if it's necessary to stop the war and to stop the killing. But I think that we should expect, and the president certainly expects, Europe to play the leading role here. And what he said very clearly is, look, the United States is open to having the conversation, but we're not going to make commitments until we figure out what's going to be necessary to stop the war in the first place. And I think that it's, the president is very good. He never takes anything off the table. He never puts anything fully on the table because he doesn't want to give away his leverage. And this is the private conversation that we're all going to have about what's necessary to stop the war. But no matter what happens, no matter what form this takes, the Europeans are going to have to take the lion's share of the burden. It's their continent, it's their security, and the president's been very clear they're going to have to step up here.
What's it like meeting Putin? Just what was he like, just one-on-one?
So I've actually never met Putin. The president did that meeting. I've talked to him on the phone a number of times. It's interesting. He's more soft-spoken than you would necessarily expect. The American media has a particular image of him. He's soft-spoken in a certain way. He's very deliberate. He's very careful. And I think fundamentally he's a person who looks out for the interests as he sees it of Russia. And I think one of the reasons he respects the President of the United States is because he knows the President looks out for the interests of the American people. And while they often disagree about issues, and obviously the president has been very critical of Vladimir Putin, the president's also willing to work with anybody if he thinks it's going to accomplish an important goal for America. And we all agree an important goal is to stop the killing.
Let's move to the economy, because that is still the number one issue in the United States for most voters.
Sure.
The Democrats seem to be banking on an economic downturn, just like they seem to be banking on chaos in the streets against the National Guard.
Sure.
How do you see the economy in the next 6 months as we're seeing some continuing uncertainty regarding interest rates and Jerome Powell?
Well, unfortunately, you have the Democrats. I think they really are betting against the United States. We're betting on the United States and the American people. There are a lot of good things happening in the economy. You have a lot of new investment coming in part because of the tariffs. People are trying to avoid the tariffs by building in the United States, which is their whole point, Laura, and why the president has been right about this issue from the beginning. You see blue-collar wages rising at their fastest rate in 50, 60 years. You see inflation cooling off, though there's still a lot of work to do there. So I feel very good about where the economy is. You can never predict the future, but I think what people all over the world recognize is that it's a time to build in the United States of America. If you want to build a car, you want to build a car manufacturing facility, if you want to build a next generation technology facility, if you want to build houses, whatever you want to do, we are the place to do business.
How about rare earths and magnets, which is what we're dependent on with China, which gives them an enormous amount of leverage over us.
And that's something the president has really directed the entire team to fix that issue, because whether it's rare earth magnets or pharmaceuticals, he wants the United States to depend on Americans. We should not be in a situation where foreign adversaries or competitors have control over critical parts of our economy. Think about this, Laura. God forbid Americans are in some sort of conflict and we can't get antibiotics because we're in a conflict against a country that makes the antibiotics. You don't have economic freedom and you don't have real prosperity unless you make your own stuff. That's why the president of the United States is making it so much easier to build things and make things in America.
Now, I know you love talking about politics because you're going to say, well, we can't look forward to 2028. I understand that.
I'm sick of politics,
But Democrats are still doing their 2024 autopsy.
Yes.
Okay. And part of their autopsy is that going forward, they need to kind of be more like Trump in tone, tougher, have nicknames. Newsom's given you a nickname, which I don't even understand, called Just Dance Vance. So I guess, what's your favorite dance? What's your favorite dance music? I mean, it's the dumbest nickname. But how lost are the Democrats right now? And you can answer the dance question.
I mean, look, the autopsy for the Democrats, some free political advice from the President of the United States is stop sounding like crazy people. That really is all it is. I mean, this idea that Gavin Newsom is somehow going to mimic Donald Trump's style, I think that ignores the fundamental genius of President Trump's political success, which is that he's authentic. He just is who he is. You've got to be yourself. You've actually got to talk to people honestly about the issues. I don't think it's that complicated. Don't be a crazy person. Be authentic. If the Democrats did that, they'd do a hell of a lot better. But the thing is, the Democrats really can't help themselves. If you look at the transgender issue, they're still talking about letting men play in women's sports. If you look at the crime issue, they're calling Donald Trump a fascist for taking action that in 9 days has dropped armed robberies by 55%. So part of sounding less crazy is being less crazy. And if the Democrats were less crazy, I think we'd all get along a whole lot better.
I'm not trying to pick on California because I am a member of the California bar, so don't get me here. But look, we've had a situation where they're giving commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens who can't speak English.
Who don't have basic English competency.
And they're killing Americans,
which matters a whole lot because if you're going to read a road sign, Laura, you might as well, or you need to actually read the language the road sign is written in. And of course, this illegal alien in California killed 3 innocent people because he was reckless, he was dangerous, he shouldn't have been in the country. But now we come to find out he can't even read in the language the road signs are written in. So this is, again, it goes to the Democrats' basic problem, which is they're just too crazy. Imagine if you had a Democratic Party that was focused on enhancing the prosperity and the safety of American citizens rather than bringing in millions of low-wage illegal immigrants, giving them the right to vote, and allowing them to effectively make it harder for Americans to live a good life. That's all this is about. They care more about low-wage foreigners than they do about their own people. That is the fundamental craziness at the heart of the Democratic Party. And until they change that, Gavin Newsom can mimic Donald Trump all that he wants to. They're still going to lose unless they get better policies that actually serve the American people.
Given the fact that they're endangering the lives and killing American citizens, as we saw with that horrific crash in Florida.
Literally killing American citizens.
Literally killing Americans. I mean, these are not made up statistics. These just happen. I mean, federal highway funds, that's leverage that the federal government has over the states that refuse to do the basics.
That's exactly
Would you
right.
consider advising that DOT and the administration pull back on federal highway funds for these states?
So I don't want to get ahead of any administration announcements, but we are looking at a whole host of points of leverage we can exercise over California and other states to make sure they comply with the law. Sanctuary cities are killing people because you allow these violent criminals to set up shop in your cities. Obviously, you saw this case with a person who murdered people on the road, 3 people on the road, because he couldn't even read the road signs. We have a lot of points of leverage here, but fundamentally, I think the American people have to stand with us here. Because when we go and tell the governor of California or the governor of New York that you have to stop putting the interests of illegal aliens over American citizens, we need the American people to stand with us. And I think that they will, I think that they are, but we're definitely not going to let this slide, Laura. You can't do it. You've got to stop putting the interests of foreigners who don't have the right to be here over the interests of American citizens. That is the entire point and purpose of the Democratic Party. If you go back to the election of 2024, what was the big issue? The big issue was illegal immigration. They were actually defending the rights of illegal immigrants to come into our country, to vote in our elections, to collect Social Security and Medicaid that ought by right go to American citizens, to say nothing of housing. This is actually the biggest driver of housing costs in some of these big blue cities, is that they've flooded the zone with illegal immigrants. As we've kicked illegal aliens out of our country, you actually see housing costs start to level off. So fundamentally, the difference between Republicans and Democrats is we care about American citizens. They actually don't like American citizens and want to replace them with low-wage foreigners. It's a very stark difference, and I think the American people are going to continue to reward us because of it.
All right. When Elon Musk departed, he said it was, dramatic departure. And I know you know him well, you're good friends with him. But he said he's going to start a third party and not send everyone into the stratosphere. But he's since kind of backed off that. And now, according to the Wall Street Journal, he is considering backing you in 2028. I know you don't want to get ahead of the president. He's only 7 months into this. But would that be something you would welcome, certainly his staying in politics and perhaps supporting you down the road?
Yeah, so I saw the story, and as far as I can tell, the story is completely fake. I've never talked with Elon Musk or frankly any other donor about 2028. I do think that it would be a huge mistake for Elon to go forward with a third party. And my argument to him is, whether you like it or not, you are now perceived by the far left as on the side of the American right. You believe in law and order, you believe in closed borders, you believe in economic growth and prosperity, you believe in making things in the United States of America. The idea that Elon is ever going to go back to being sort of in the middle, where Democrats and Republicans both like him, that's just not going to happen. He is perceived as being on the American right. And so if he doesn't like things the Republican Party is doing, my advice to Elon would be, try to fix the Republican Party. Try to push it in your own way. disagree with me all you want, disagree with the President of the United States, but don't pretend that you can make a big difference with a third party. I think Elon would make a much bigger difference if he stayed loyal to President Trump's Republican Party, and if he had disagreements, express those disagreements from the inside as opposed to from the outside.
The New York Times just reported that the Democrats are in a voter registration spiral. 2.1 million Americans ditched the Democrat Party between 2020 and 2024. Meanwhile, the GOP is doing pretty well. They're gaining 2.4 million. So is this a moment where we could see the midterm curse reversed and the Republican Party gain some ground?
I think we have a good chance, but take nothing for granted, Laura. You have the Democrats are still trying to register illegal aliens. They still explicitly say that they want illegal aliens to vote in federal elections. We still have, I think, a lot of headwinds from the media. They never tell the truth about what we're doing, about what the president has accomplished for the American people. So don't rest on our laurels. Keep on achieving victories for the American people and keep on trying to win. That's our path to being able to continue to govern this country. I'm not going to bank anything in 2026. We just have to keep working at it.
Who's your best friend in the cabinet?
We have a lot of good friends, right? I mean, the weird thing is, you say it's one person, then fundamentally that's an insult to other people. I mean, Marco and I are very close. We were close in the Senate. He's been a great friend of mine. I think he's doing a great job. Pete Hegseth, who I went to Union Station, I think is doing a great job as Secretary of Defense. And really, the D.C. swamp tried to destroy Pete Hegseth unlike anybody in the administration. And that really kind of, whenever I see the worst people in the world trying to tear a guy down, that makes me think he's on our side.
Are you doing push-ups and pull-ups with him and Bobby? Are you?
I have not yet done, and I'm sure they can do more push-ups and pull-ups than I have. But I am, it's funny, I do love this presidential focus on fitness. And Bobby and Pete are obviously leading the way, but I'm going to participate as much as I can.
You're going to Georgia, big, beautiful bill. Can we expect any fireworks down there? What can we say?
Well, I guess it depends on who's going to show up to the rally. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun, talk about the big successes of the big, beautiful bill, the fact that it lowers taxes for the gross majority of Americans, the fact that we're making it easier to build things in America again. So we're going to have a good time, and we're going to talk about all the things the president's doing just to make people's lives better. That's the whole reason we're doing this. We want Americans to be able to live safe, prosperous lives in their own country. We made a lot of progress in 7 months. We're going to make a lot more.
Muy pronto, vuelve a escuchar las noticias más relevantes en este canal de noticias.